Hello, I'm Susan B. Anthony. This is my friend Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She keeps a room for me in her house so we can work together. She's an excellent writer and a charismatic speaker, but she has 7 children and doesn't get out much. So I care for her children while she writes. Then I go on the speaking tours. I speak on temperance, abolition, women's rights, women needing the right to vote. I give 75 to 100 speeches a year. That's how I support myself.
You know what my husband says? Susan stirred the puddings, Elizabeth stirred up Susan, and Susan stirs up the world. We met in 1851 at a conference in Seneca Falls, New York. No, not the big women's rights conference of 1848, where women signed the Declaration of Sentiments, which I wrote, fashioned after the Declaration of Independence, expressing our grievances. When I added that women should have the right to vote, many people, including my husband and the Quaker ladies who helped me write it, thought I had gone too far.
But without the right to vote, we were dependent on men to change the laws, and men were not willing to do that.
Tradition and law prevented us from getting an education. We were controlled by our fathers and later by our husbands. We had no rights to our children or our property. And we couldn't speak in public.
Oh, well, I was raised Quaker, so Quakers did allow women to speak in public. So it was really hard for me to hold my tongue at public meetings.
Oh, I remember that teachers' convention.
Seneca Falls, in New York.
In New York. Must have been 1,000 people in attendance. The men were complaining about the low status and low pay of teachers. True, they made only $650 per year, but women doing exactly the same thing made only $250. And women received far less respect than men did. After sitting hours, you grew so impatient.
All I said was, Mr. President!
Yes, but pandemonium followed. If all the witches that had been drowned, burned, and hanged in the old world and the new had suddenly appeared threatening vengeance, the officers of that convention could not have been thrown into greater consternation.
It took them a half hour of heated debate before they decided to let me speak. And I said, "Gentlemen, it seems to me that none of you quite comprehends the cause of the disrespect of which you complain. Would teaching be a more lucrative profession if men were not competing with the cheap labor of women? Want your profession to be more lucrative? Increase the salaries of women." The ladies applauded.
We did a lot together. In 1852, we formed the New York Women's State Temperance Society because the men wouldn't let you speak at their conference. 2 years later, we formed the Women's Loyal National League. We collected nearly 400,000 signatures in support of abolition.
Yes, I did organize a lot of petition drives. And after the war against slavery, we formed the American Equal Rights Association for both women and African Americans. And when the Negro man got the vote and we didn't, we were exasperated.
Oh, yes, we were. Oh, but many states did pass laws that married women could own property. Women could go to college. So progress was being made, but we still couldn't vote.
Oh, but I did vote. 1872, I was arrested. And they wouldn't let me testify at my own trial because women weren't competent to testify. They fined me, but I never paid the fine, and they never came to collect it.
Remember the women's rights newspaper we published?
The Revolution.
The Revolution. It came out weekly for 4 years.
It did.
What was that slogan?
Men.
Their rights.
And nothing more.
Women, their rights, and nothing less.
And we wrote that 6-volume history of women's suffrage. Matilda Jocelyn Gage helped us in that. But I think the biggest thing was founding the National Woman Suffrage Association. You were its first president.
That was in 1869. 9 years later, we arranged for a constitutional amendment to be presented to Congress. It finally was ratified 42 years later in 1920.
But we were gone by then. You were 86 when you died in 1902. You had grown more radical as you aged. I had grown more conservative. We weren't as close, but I missed you terribly. My death came 4 years later. I was also 86. Pneumonia and heart failure. To think I have had more than 60 years of hard struggle for a little liberty, then to die without it seems so cruel.